Well, thank you, Karina, for that very warm welcome. And thank you all so much for being here with me today. I know there's so many fun and exciting things happening right now at Wanderlust, so I'm touched, very humbled that you guys have chosen to spend this hour with me. And I'm actually really inspired because working through adversity, dealing with the painful and difficult times in our lives is not what you would typically consider fun or exciting things to explore. Yet here you guys all are, ready to throw caution to the wind and see what this is all about. So I'm really grateful that you guys will be here with me for the next hour. I should say that there is, all the suffering and pain we've gone through is not for nothing. There is a bit of a silver lining for many of us, and that is because it's brought some of us to our spiritual paths. For some it might be yoga, or Vedanta, or Buddhism, Christianity, maybe just simply more mindful living. But the experience of pain and suffering and a broken heart, for myself and many others I know, has been a catalyst that has really pushed us into find a different way of living. So regardless of what path it's brought us to, here we all are, and it's a very beautiful thing for me to be sitting here and seeing all of you guys. There's a quote from Ram Dass that I think is very applicable to this, and he says that suffering is the sandpaper of our incarnation. It does its work of shaping us. And that is something that I have definitely experienced firsthand. I can validate that man knows what he's talking about. I think hopefully some of you, well, not hopefully, unfortunately, but some of you can probably relate to that as well. The trick, though, is that we need to find a way to skillfully work with these times of pain and suffering in our lives. Otherwise, we are just going to be caught in this perpetual cycle and at the mercy of life and its ups and downs for our inner state of well-being. And that's what I hope, or that's what we will be discussing today, is the experience of pain and suffering and a broken heart, the experience of true spirit, and bridging the gap between the two. So thank you guys again for being here. I want to start out with the not so fun stuff, the pain and broken heart and suffering and all that jazz, and I promise I'll be as light as I can throughout all of this. Our natural tendency as human beings is to avoid pain at all costs. And I get it, dealing with things like fear, anger, hurt, sadness, it's not fun. It sucks. What a lot of us do or have done in the past is we turn to things like drugs or alcohol or an overindulgence in food or sex or television, video games, sometimes even an overindulgence in spiritual practices as a way of avoiding, this internal muck that we have just been collecting throughout this life, and who knows how many other countless lives. But as we're doing this, we're keeping ourselves locked in this cycle. It's a perpetual cycle of more of the same. More pain, more disease, more fear, more anger, more hurt, more sadness. And I speak from experience. I spent many, many years of my life addicted to drugs and alcohol in my attempt to mask my experience of pain and a broken heart and suffering. My life, this isn't easy for me to share, but I do like to share a little vulnerably about my experience, just because it's important for me to let people know that no matter what you're going through, these experiences of pain and our broken hearts and suffering can be healed. So just a tiny bit about me and my experience with addiction. It brought me to some very dark places in my life. I ended up in numerous rehabs and detoxes. I've literally been to the emergency room more times than I can remember. I've been in jails. I have been to psychiatric hospitals. I have experienced seizures, and there's been a couple of suicide attempts and all that good stuff. I promise you I am not sitting here batshit crazy talking to you. I'm only relatively crazy these days, so it's gotten better. But, again, it's important for me just to share a little bit about that, because I know that there's got to be at least one person in this room that's experiencing not necessarily drugs or alcohol, but some real hardships in their life. And through my experience, at least, I know there are times where I felt completely hopeless. that little flame of hope that was flickering had gone out, and that it was just gone. But as we'll be getting to, true spirit, the experience of that and cultivating that was real grace in my life. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So you guys don't need to be addicted to drugs or alcohol, obviously, or hit anywhere near the rock bottoms that I did to have had your own experiences of pain and suffering in life. That's a given, I would say. I was interviewing a Trappist monk by the name of Father Thomas Keating a few years back, and he's this beautiful old man. He's in his 80s, and just a brilliant mystic Christian. And towards the end of the interview, I mentioned to him that I was in recovery from drugs and alcohol, and he laughed this kind of cute, nice old 80-year-old man laugh, and he said, "Well, I'm in recovery too, but I'm in recovery from the human condition." I mean, how true is that? As the Buddha said in his first noble truth, if you have taken a human birth, you are bound to experience pain and suffering. It's inevitable. But as the Buddha also went on to teach, the amount of pain and suffering that we experience is much more in our control than many of us are aware of for the greater part of our lives. But then again, here we all are on a spiritual path, and we're learning to work with that. So just to reiterate, something I touched on in the introduction is that these experiences of pain and suffering and a broken heart, there actually really is a lot of grace in them, because these are the times in our life where we are our weakest and we are our most vulnerable, and we are actually at that point on very fertile ground for spiritual growth. Our egos are bruised and beaten, and they're putting up the white flag isn't so difficult in those times. And that's really a perfect time where we can start to surrender self-will and allow a space, for our true spirit to emerge. So I've been talking about true spirit. So what exactly is that? And this can be a very loaded question. So let me preface this by saying when I talk about spirit, I share strictly from my own experience of it. I am a huge advocate for finding out what things mean to you and your own lives by way of your own experience. I will never know what your experience is. You will never know what mine is. So I just will share something, and hopefully it will help guide you along your path, and that's the best I can do. For some of you, you might come to know the spirit is Brahman in the Hindu tradition, or maybe Dharmakaya in the Buddhist tradition, or Godhead in Christianity, or maybe just simply being. That might be your experience of it. Or maybe it's none of the above. That's fine. Again, the important thing is cultivating this experience for yourself so you know what spirit truly is in your life. Now, regardless of how we come to know spirit, the one quality that I will say all the wisdom traditions share in common, or even if you're not following a specific tradition or path, is that it is transcendental from our experience of our material selves, our kind of small egoic self. But at the same time, you hear a lot of people in spirituality, they get kind of caught up in trying to negate this material self and the ego nature. And I understand why, I get that. But the trick is, this is very much a part of our experience, just as much so as spirit is. So many of the wisdom traditions agree that we have at least two selves. So, there's probably many more, and they do talk about more, but that's kind of beyond the scope of what we can really get into in these 20 minutes or so we have. So the two selves that, again, many of the wisdom traditions agree we have are that we have our relative finite self. So, for example, my name's Chris, here's my body and my characteristics and so on. On the other side, we have our infinite, unmanifest, ultimate self. This self is not separate from this material self. It's aware of, but not separate from. So that's why I say it's important not to try to negate our physical selves, because that is a very real part of our experience, obviously. So when I say that we're not separate from spirit, I say that because all things manifest. And again, that's just my experience. But they all rise out of this perfect emptiness, which is spirit. If we look back at the Big Bang, we can see that there has been a very divine creative intelligence orchestrating this whole thing, from subatomic particles to atoms, to molecules, to cells, to organisms. I believe that it is no accident that we are here having this human experience. I just don't see how that could possibly be. There really, in my experience of this true spirit, it really is a creative force, a force of love, a force of intention, a very, very real thing. So a fair question to ask would be, okay, so if this spirit is my true nature, my deepest nature, why is it so elusive? I mean, that's something I know that I have asked myself time and again in the many years I've been on this spiritual path. I think a very easy way to answer this, and I'm sure there are more answers, but what resonates most for me is that I've looked back to birth, or we can look back to our formative years as children, or even into early teenage years. And for most of us, we've been conditioned from our parents, from our friends, from teachers, from school, society, and so forth, that we are these material bodies. We are our names, we are our thoughts, we are our emotions, we are our sense perceptions. And so we've been kind of conditioned to identify strictly with these things. And that is not to bash our friends or family or teachers, because they were just teaching us the same things that they were taught. And they were doing what they believed was in our best interest, and much of the time it definitely was in our best interest. But what's resulted from that is that we've spent so much time identifying strictly with the bodies and the thoughts and the emotions that we've experienced so much unnecessary suffering in our lives, unaware of the fact that underneath our entire life has been this witnessing awareness, our true spirit. These terms I'm using are all interchangeable, but they point back to the same thing. So how do we come to know this true spirit? There are numerous ways. I'm assuming most of us here have some experience with spirituality and various spiritual paths and practices. Meditation is a very obvious answer. There are so many types of meditation that there's too many, obviously, to talk about, but finding one that resonates for you is huge. And beginning to kind of create that space between our thoughts, our emotions, our physical self, and anchoring into that spirit. But what's even more immediate, what we can begin to do right in this very moment, is simply become aware that underlying this experience, there is an awareness that is happening. So I'm Chris, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to all you lovely people who are hopefully sitting there listening. And underneath this experience, there is an awareness that is happening. And the beautiful thing is that in all the known universes, this awareness, this spirit is one. This spirit is you, and it's you, and him, and her, and it's me. It's our true spirit. We say namaste. It's a very common saying that we use. The divinity in me honors the divinity in you. And when we are in that place, we are one, and we honor one another. We are always in that place of divinity, always. It's just that a lot of the time, we're up here and we're not here. So I think a big part of our spiritual practice is making that very long trip from up here down to here. And that's why we do things like yoga and meditation. There's a pointing out, just to further elaborate for a moment, a pointing out exercise that author and philosopher Ken Wilber uses that I think does a much better job than I ever could of trying to explain this. So he simply asks us to think back 5 minutes ago from where we are right now. And in those 5 minutes, recognize that for most of us, probably many of our thoughts are different. Our physical sensations are probably different. In some cases, the scenery is different, obviously not this one. But the one thing that has not changed is the awareness of what is happening, the awareness that is underlying this experience. And Ken then goes on and asks us to think back 5 hours, 5 months, 5 years ago, all the way back to the time of birth and beyond that. We can think about the millions of thoughts and emotions we've had, the hopes and dreams that have come and gone, everything that has changed in our lives since the time of birth. The one thing that has not changed, that has absolutely never ever changed, is a self-liberating sense of I amness, which again is interchangeable with true spirit or witnessing awareness. So I know we're starting to get a little low on time. There is a practice that I want to share with you guys, one that I have used for years now, and it has been exponentially beneficial in anchoring into this witnessing awareness during times of pain and suffering and the experience of a broken heart. So I've kind of broken it down just into two parts. You can close your eyes or you don't have to, because I'm just kind of explaining it. It's something that we want to do whenever we become aware of any sense of disease arising in us, whether it's our thoughts or emotions or physical sensations. Wherever we first become aware of that, that's where we start with it. So let's say we are aware of some negative thoughts that are happening, that are causing us some form of dis-ease. They could be self-judging thoughts, or they could be judging thoughts towards others. Literally anything that we're experiencing that is creating discomfort in ourselves is completely applicable for this. And, again, our natural tendency is we want to suppress these things. We want to turn away from them. But in this practice, we want to become very intimate with them. We want to hear exactly what they are saying to us. And we let them say whatever they need to say. And so from the thoughts, then we visit the emotions. What emotions are they then creating? What are we feeling? Is it anxiety? Is it sadness? Is it frustration, anger? And anything, again, that is causing dis-ease is applicable. And then, so once we're very familiar with the thoughts and the emotions, the last thing we want to do in this first part is we want to scan our body, because usually along with this discomfort there's a physical accompanying discomfort as well. So are we feeling pain in our head? Are we feeling tightness in our chest? Or maybe our stomach's churning. Maybe there's aches in our legs. It could be anything. But again, we just want to become very clear on what we're experiencing. So once we have this clarity of what our thoughts are saying, what our emotions are feeling like, and what our physical sensations are feeling like, that is the first part. The second part is we take those three things and we want to actually imagine ourselves wrapping them in a warm blanket in the same way a mother would wrap a newborn baby in a blanket. And we're actually going to mentally imagine ourselves holding this pain and these emotions and this discomfort. And if that's a little too personal, if it's too great of a pain for you, it's okay to picture yourself putting it in a baby carriage and rocking it back and forth. That works just as well. And what we do at this point is we can mentally or verbally say to these painful thoughts and emotions and physical discomfort that we're aware of them, that we honor them, that we are there with them with a completely open heart. We are there to unconditionally love them for as long as they need us to be there with them. The amazing thing about this practice, from my experience, is that literally, usually within a minute, probably half a minute, it all just dissipates. Because we're completely flipping the script on what our natural tendency is, which is to avert away from this discomfort. Sometimes it takes a few more minutes than that, and that's fine too. When we say that we're there, honoring it with an open heart, and that we will be there with it for as long as it needs us to be, we mean that. But by doing that, we are healing. We are allowing these thoughts and emotions that we keep pushing, and we've been pushing throughout our lives down and down. We're allowing them to be there. They're a part of us. And as we're doing that, we are also anchoring ourselves. When we're saying that we are there with unconditional love and an open heart, we are saying that from the place of spirit, of our witnessing awareness, of I amness. And it's creating a space so that when these thoughts and emotions arise, we are no longer angry, we are no longer sad, but rather there is anger happening in our experience. There is sadness happening in our experience. And as we create that little gap, there is tremendous freedom in that. It's a really beautiful thing. So we're not only creating greater peace in our lives through that, but we're cultivating our experience of spirit. So with all of this said, life is still going to happen. No matter what, we're going to have our really beautiful days. We are going to have our really shitty days, and that is just the way it is. That's life. That's the way it happens. But as we continue to cultivate our experience of and our relationship with true spirit, life no longer is happening to us, but rather it begins to happen through us. And in that experience, there is tremendous liberation. It is a really beautiful thing. So from my heart to yours, I really sincerely hope, you guys, that as you continue to skillfully work with the adverse times in your life, the times of pain, the times of suffering, along with whatever other spiritual practices you have, that you come to know this incredible light that is your true spirit, and that each of us is able to take that light and we can shine it out into this very strange and beautiful world and make it a brighter place for all sentient beings. So thank you guys so much for being here with me today.